So today we're going to be talking a little bit more from Accenture side, what we do. I think a lot of you might already know us from digital infrastructure and projects along those lines, but there really is a lot of momentum around sustainability, circularity, traceability, and that's what we have the team here for. So just a quick introduction. My name is Akriti. I'm based in Stockholm and responsible for traceability and circularity within the company. We also have Philip and Miodrag, who I might just pass over for a quick introduction from Philip and Mio.
Yep. Hello, everybody. Nice to see you all. My name's Philip Appleton. As you can see, I'm based in Stockholm, and I've been working with traceability now for about 13 or 14 years. My credentials are really that I started one of Scandinavia's first IoT companies by accident, and that was based on RFID and traceability in the retail industry.
Thanks, Phil. Mio?
Good afternoon. My name is Miodrag. I'm based in Brussels, and I'm the Global Sustainable Value Chain Traceability and DPP lead in Accenture. And feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I have quite a distinct name. If you combine this with Accenture, there shouldn't be too many Miodrags up there.
Perfect. Thank you both. So as you can see, we have all the right people over here. So if anyone has any questions, I'm sure we'll have some time at the end. So with that said, let's get started. So we thought we'll touch a bit upon a few different aspects. So Mio will be covering regulatory compliance, and with his experience in Brussels, I'll be looking into a few use cases from some of our clients, specifically on traceability and circularity. And then we have Philip, who'll be dealing with the how part with standards and technology. So without further ado, Mio, I will pass it to you to help us out with regulatory compliance.
Thank you very much. If we can move on to the next slide. Now, rest assured, I'm not going to speak too much about the regulation and repeat what you already know. What I want to echo is that there are things that we know. So in a very simplistic way, we can explain the digital product passport and the ESPR regulation overview. So there are things that we know. The most important thing that we don't know is the information to be included in the DPP for specific product groups. So what I wanted to do with the time allocated to my presentation is more address the possible impacts and opportunities of this regulation. So if you go to the next slide, please. Now, the first impact, and this is a recurring theme that we have with clients, is actually very practical. How do you identify your products today? How will you identify these products digitally? And how will you extend your product labeling to the digital domain? In terms of consumer goods, companies, those selling in retail worldwide, they're used to barcoding. But even those companies have to ask themselves, how will they turn their unique product identifiers digital by adding a web enablement? How will they manage the transition to QR codes? And of course, what will happen? Where will these QR codes lead to? And how will they structure the product information required by the delegated acts? And of course, how will this digital product passport and the information on it evolve? Luckily, there are a lot of precedents and I would say good organizations, depending, of course, from one industry to the other. But when we talk about consumer goods industry, retail industry, we look to GS1, and GS1 is already addressing this. So the example that you see here is neutral, and Philip will show you an example which is GS1 specific. But for me, the first point to ask is, how does that impact my master data? How do I need to make the translations between my internal product identifiers, SAP product identifiers, material identifiers? How do I manage this? How do I connect this with product lifecycle management, product information management, et cetera, et cetera? So definitely a place to start and think about in terms of impact. The second piece that I don't want to talk too much about because it's unclear, but it is known, is the product information. We know that the aim of the regulation is circularity. We know that we need to have certain design principles that we need to adopt, but we need data for that. And some of this data will come from the upstream supply chain. And this brings me always to the same question to our clients. What kind of upstream supplier engagement do you have? What is your upstream supply chain visibility? How do you actually capture data from your upstream suppliers? And what is the current level of interaction between the tier 1 and tier N in your value chains? And we offer a solution, which is, well, if you don't have a sustainable procurement policy, which requires your suppliers, tier 1 suppliers, to have traceability and to have knowledge of their tier 2 plus supply chains, looking from our client's perspective, this needs to be written down. And you need to have a legal precedent, contractual precedent, where they will be having traceability, they will be capturing data, and they will be sharing this data with you. So a lot of soft things to think about, like, of course, upstream, but let's not forget downstream. Who gets involved in the downstream part of the value chain? How will you combine, for example, the packaging and packaging waste regulation, which also mentions QR coding, and where a data set is part of the digital product passport, most likely? How to combine this with you have your extended producer responsibility obligations? And what have you designed as a company or an industry or within your national market units? What kind of provisions do you have for waste collection, waste sorting, recycling, and so on? So there are actually a lot of things to look at without needing to wait for the exact regulation, starting with product identification and web enablement. If you can move to the next slide, please. The good news is, the infrastructure that is proposed for digital product passports actually already exists. And if you look to our colleagues in North America, since 2015, the Consumer Brands Association actually had in the US and Canada a QR code on a voluntary basis, which was placed on products in a very similar fashion, at least utilizing the same technology in a similar way as the proposed digital product passport. So conceptually and technologically, they're similar. Currently, they have 1,000 brands with approximately 100,000 products, which make available on a voluntary basis product information, which has now been expanded to include recycling options, basically indicating to the consumer if the packaging is recyclable or not, or if the product is recyclable or not. And you can all look that up on the website of smartlabel.org. And interestingly enough, it is searchable by product code. So you can think of it again as a kind of a registry of digital product passports with data which is voluntary, but it is structured data. And this has been in existence for over 10 years. Next slide, please. And last but not least, at Accenture, we're quite focused on business value. I want to bring in another aspect. Whatever you're doing, the ESPR and DPP compliance are not actually the only things on your plate. We have technology advancing, we have standards advancing, we definitely have the migration of product labeling to the digital domain, and this brings a whole number of opportunities to actually interact with trade partners, with clients and consumers through this technology and through these possibilities. The question is, once you have to endure the cost of legal compliance, and compliance is cost, how do you make a return on investment into that infrastructure from voluntary value business-driven use cases? And if you move to the next slide, I will just run you through a particular scenario that we have explored with a fashion company, which is, the same infrastructure can lead you to an app, and this app can also have, if you want, one information junction where you can scan the QR code and can be directed to the regulated information if you're a professional user, if you're a consumer, as per the EU regulations. But the same QR code can also lead you on the same infrastructure through a use case where you would access and book services in the store. You can access enhanced product information. Now that you have identified yourself based on who you are, you can have different experiences. And if you're a valued customer with your purchase history, you can be welcomed and you can be even access to very regionalized or localized products before you even decide to buy anything. If you want to buy something, it is not only the shop assistant who knows the stock, you can know it as well. And you can also go through the fast checkout, self-service, everything that goes, loyalty program. And if you want to actually have a resale value of this, you can have certificates, proof of authenticity, you can activate your warranty, you can have access, depending again on your purchasing history, access to specific collections or offerings, you can have personalization, and there is a whole lot of things that are here, not for the consumer, but for the staff, like, for example, replenishment, and you can have rewards. And you also have the reuse and recycling bit, which is attached to this on a purely value-driven use case. For example, certified pre-owned resale, authentication, and incentives to actually return the products at the end, take it back, or have it purchased back from you. So to sum it all up, yes, there are a lot of things that we know conceptually. There are a lot of things we don't know in details of how the products, digital product passport will work and what is the regulation going to look like. But we know of the opportunities. We know the underlying technology behind the digital product passports. We know that this has been going on for 10 years in North America and that it can be done on a voluntary basis. And we also know that there is a multitude of value drivers and use cases where you can reuse the same infrastructure for compliance for business value. Thank you for this, and I will hand over now to, I believe, Akriti.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Mio. That was fantastic. So now that we have sort of like an overview of sort of the reasons and the basic infrastructure and how to go about it, I thought it would be a good idea to delve in a little bit further. And Mio brought this up already, but there's sort of two main camps that we see when it comes to the reasons behind a digital product passport. Of course, the main driver to avoid fines and make sure that you're in compliance is having a regulated DPP. And this can be specifically for the DPP. There are, of course, a number of other regulations in the industries as well. The Deforestation Act within the EU is, of course, a big one. If we look outside of the European Union, there are global traceability and supply chain transparency regulations as well. In North America and the US and Canada, of course, a big one the last couple of years has been the UFLPA. There's multiple regulations across the globe that kind of warrant this kind of mandate that we're looking at. But of course, outside of just compliance, we are looking at what actually makes a company tick into business value propositions. So looking at the kind of consumer engagement we have these days, we see consumers are much more interested in kind of understanding on their own what is the source of a product, what is the end life, how can they deal with recyclability. And we see these two sort of main areas being a common denominator about having the right data and the right infrastructure to actually get started on these projects. The other interesting aspect is that we see a lot of these these regulations and key drivers across different industries. And a big part of that, of course, also has to do with the reason and the main materials that have been identified as the first draft as part of the DPP, of course. So now we have steel, we have aluminium, we have textiles, we have all really, really key components that are part of numerous supply chain industries. So if we look at some of the use cases across fashion, electronics, chemical compliance, furniture, like Robin talked about, of course, this is something that really is a very, very fundamental concept. So when it comes to fashion, we look at being able to sort of make sure that you can see across your value chain where you've been sourcing from. For electronics, a big part of the reason that companies are looking into this, besides the DPP, is also when it comes to e-waste recycling, has become a big mandate. Furniture, we've discussed already with Robin, who did a really great job. Chemical safety, construction, and the automotive industry, of course, when it comes to batteries as well, has been a very, very key component. So this is really something that is fundamental, and I think working groups like this are really great because we have people from different industries who can share their best practices, and we can come to sort of a common understanding about how to actually go about it. So that being said, we can look at a few use cases and examples within some of these specific industries. I'm sure a lot of you would have been part of the Trace for Value project that we had prior to this. So I'm just going to delve into the textile sector a little bit. But these days, it's fantastic to be able to walk into a shop and scan a QR code for a t-shirt, for example, and you can see really all the way down the value chain where the cotton was sourced, where that was actually ginned, where it was milled, where it was made into fabric and dyed, right? And a lot of times this can be really quite a global thread that connects all of these aspects. So potentially, sourced cotton in India and then fabricated in Bangladesh, then dyed in Turkey, and then the final product in Sweden, for example. But one of the biggest challenges when it comes to this is being able to actually classify and collect this data from the different tiers across the value chain. A lot of times you have this information potentially at tier 1, tier 2, but when you're going all the way down to the cotton farmers, for example, it becomes quite difficult to actually map this information out. So we've sort of looked at a few different ways of categorizing this data. So we look at, brand information, product information, of course, circularity, supply chain, care package information, for example. And getting these data points can be quite tricky, but at least starting out with a framework to be able to do so makes a very big difference. And from what I've seen with some of the research papers that have come out as well, is that there's across 100 different data points that need to be collected for each piece of clothing that comes in, which is a massive undertaking when it comes to textiles. When we look at some of the projects that we see, we have some really great examples actually from some of the brands across the world who are actually starting projects like these, who've been doing it now for a couple of years and taking it from there. We've just looked at textiles so far, but then when we look at the luxury industry, that goes even more detailed and even more tricky at times. So we have a couple of brands who've been working on pilot projects when it comes to the luxury industry. And if we look at leather, for example, the kind of specific details that you have to delve into really is quite astounding. You need to go all the way back to the specific farm. You need to almost know specifically which batch or which particular cattle farm things came from. And that is also something that's quite amazing to see when it's done properly. So we have a few different examples. We'll share the slide deck with you later on, so you can take a look as well. But it is worth noting that the challenges faced with this is something that can be overcome with having the right data and the right digital infrastructure in place as well. And then finally, a little example into how other applications can also be used. So we work very closely with SGS, which is a massive Swiss agri-business company. They have commodities and the types of products from all around the world. I know personally that they've looked into coffee, they've looked into just everything that you can possibly imagine. And one other aspect besides the digital product passport has been the EUDR, the deforestation regulation. So we've actually managed to build build a platform where you can actually look at the kinds of activities you can see here when it comes to compliance reporting. You can do due diligence, you can do material traceability, and ultimately have, you know, the right information going in and coming out when it comes to reporting. So the whole purpose of what we're looking at is that, yes, we have different data points and different rules for the DPP, for the EUDR, as well as global regulations. But ultimately, if we have, you know, a framework that we can work with to understand how to get this data from across the supply chain, we have multiple ways of then, you know, either doing regulatory compliance or business value use cases going forward, which overall is going to benefit both companies as well as their supply chains. So that being said, now that we've discussed why we're doing this, what we're doing as well, I will leave it to Philip to take over. Potentially the hardest part is about how to actually going about it. So over to you, Philip.
Thank you very much, Arkati. I'm not sure it's so difficult, but certainly it can get complex, like we say. But we are saved by GS1 because we keep going on about the semantic compatibility, and I know Eva's going to cover that a bit later on. So the data needs to look the same. We need to be able to understand and share data between different systems. So you need a standard. And the wonderful thing about Staffan and his crowd is that they have a standard, and it's a standard that's evolved to enable these digital product passports, if you like. Now, I know it's not the official standard, but it makes sense to use something that is there, it's mature, it's well proven, and it's already in use by millions of companies today. So I'm a big fan. And like I said in my introduction, I started one of Sweden's or Scandinavia's first IoT companies based on the fact that this standard was existing. So I actually built my company on these standards. So I have a lot to be thankful for. And I think one of the interesting things that's happening now is the digital link is actually becoming not just something that the consumers can use to track their information about their consumer products, but I'm very involved with the wind energy industry, for example, and they are saving or they're going to save an absolute fortune using digital link technology to distribute digital documents, or at least to not distribute digital documents. So I won't go too much into that because it's not really my technology, but it's a technology that we use now a lot, and we're implementing this in the wind energy industry to help them to comply with digital product passport and other sustainability regulations. So we can go to the next slide, please. So when it comes to the architecture, how is this going to look? And we talked a little bit earlier on about small to medium-sized companies. How is everybody going to manage their data? Because everybody has a responsibility to capture and store and share data. Now, this can be done in a number of ways. So if we look on the left-hand side here, this can be done by a number of federated platforms that are owned and operated by individual companies, which is fine, you know, because then what they can do is they have full control of their data, and what they have to do to allow people to see it is give credentials, and those credentials can be different based on the role of the investigator. So it could be a regulator or it could be a partner, and that they will be able to see different information with a layer of security around it to stop any sensitive information being shared to the wrong people. The other way of doing this is a centralized platform. Now, it's a federated platform, a platform that belongs to a company, is managed by a company, is great for big companies. But the small producers, the small farmers, the small and medium-sized enterprises that to this standard might be a burden, this digital product passport might be a burden. How can they economically share their data? And then you're looking at a centralized platform model, whereby maybe an industry or a subsect of an industry will create a platform for a number of companies or enterprises to upload their data. And that will be managed by that. So we don't know how this is going to work out. And I certainly don't think this is going to be part of any regulation. So I'm looking here to the future. What will we see? We will probably see a hybrid model here, whereby where it's practical, big companies will have their own platforms. And where it's not practical, there will be industry organizations or even entire industries that will manage this traceability or DPP data for that industry. So we just don't know. And, you know, I'd be interested to know anybody else's opinion. But right now, there's the companies we're talking to are, fair enough, they're mainly big companies. They're probably going to go for their own platform. But as you go further down the food chain, I'm sure that there will be differences. Now we talk about what do you have to do? And I think there's always a fairly generic process in when you have to build something new. And I'm an engineer, you know, I like to build stuff. And so here what we've got is a sort of 6 steps to what you have to do to comply with the Digital Product Passport regulations. Unique product identifier, and then a digital product profile, enable data access through the barcode. These are things that, this is a common theme now that we've been talking about, the previous presenter, and also Mio has been talking about this. Then you have to structure the product data, store and maintain the accessibility, and this is where the platform comes in. That can be a cost for a small company that is unacceptable. And then you have to collaborate with partners and educate your customers. And I think that last part is very important. What we're doing here today is educating everybody. We're all going to learn today how other people see and how other enterprises see Digital Product Passport and the compliance necessary. So I think this forum is wonderful, and I think I look forward to being more engaged with this in the future and learning how is this really going to work, because it's a journey that we don't know where the end is at the moment. So it's lovely. We can go for the next slide. And I won't go into this in any great detail, but like I say, what our model to implement digital product passports is actually encapsulated in this one slide. So we start off, we need to do an assessment. What does it mean? What does this mean for your company? And of course, that's difficult to know when we don't really know what the regulations are going to be. But over the next 4 to 5 years, we'll start to understand what is the impact and how can we overcome that and actually create value while we are complying with the regulations, as Mio was referring to earlier on. Then we have to plan and we operate. What is your operating model? How do you implement the actual infrastructure? Rolling it out. If it's your own platform, then you've got a lot of data to gather. You need to look at your operational technology, your scanners and your MES systems and your manufacturing systems to see where do you get the data from and how do you transform that data into the common semantic data that's necessary to be shared. And then the last is the operations and maintenance of the platform. It's not fire and forget, it's you have to operate it, you have to maintain it, and there will be, as we've discussed earlier on, there will be delegated regulations coming in all the time over the next 20, 30, 40 years that will have to be implemented in this platform. So it's not just something that we can buy and forget. This is something which is going to need maintenance on a regular basis. It's going to cost money, and therefore it's very important to understand where can you gain added value from the data that you have. And that's it from us.